What makes a Wild West shooter memorable? Is it the sum of its parts within the setting, or rather being able to stay grounded and focused throughout? Not necessarily trying to do anything new or groundbreaking, but rather being something more by not pretending to be anything than what it is, a simple Western shooter. Call of Juarez Gunslinger is one of those games that manages to hold its own among other shooters and Western-themed games through sheer consistency, focus, and, well, simplicity. While not perfect, it still serves as a genuine example as to why sometimes less is actually more. Hello everyone, my name is Cobalt, and today we'll be taking a look at Gunslinger's story mode, how it managed to keep me engaged, and why I believe it deserves more attention. Call of Juarez Gunslinger is the fourth and last installment in the Call of Juarez series. Though it shares the Juarez name, it doesn't really have anything to do with the other games in the series besides the overall Wild West theme. I don't plan on doing a comparison to the other games in this review, but if that's something you'd like to see later on down the road, let me know in the comments down below. You follow the story of Silas Greaves, an old man who makes a small stop at a saloon in Texas and starts to share with others his past as a criminal and bounty hunter.
Oh, I bet you got some great stories.
A couple. Any of them true?
Jack, be nice.
A few.
Each chapter begins with a cutscene presented in a highly detailed and dynamic comic-style look, where Silas introduces another part of his past. These introductions are often brief, but to the point. They don't overstay their welcome, they don't over-explain things. In fact, the majority of Silas's retellings are presented through the gameplay. Each level is played out alongside his narration. This helps to keep the player engaged through each level, instead of relying on spoken details using longer cutscenes, which might potentially lose the player's attention. Silas's retelling is kept restrained and simple.
There were killers around every corner, all wearing red bandanas. But I wasn't about to let Ringo walk away unscathed, and that's what drove me forward.
Even if I wasn't trying to actively listen to every single word he was saying during combat scenes, during some boss fight or some other duel, I could still register every single sentence he was saying, which would make the player feel as if he or she were part of the saloon. And what helps support this feeling is how some characters chip in during the narration, either with simple questions directed towards Silas and his past, or casting some form of doubt over some of his claims. And some of these moments can actually have a direct impact on the levels.
Hold on, were you attacked by Apaches? What happened to the cowboys? Did I say they were Apaches? I said Clanton's cowboys attacked me Apache style.
Now, this trend of simplicity and consistency isn't solely limited to the story. Gunslinger runs on the 5th iteration of the Chrome engine. While not a visual powerhouse, especially when you consider that's what Call of Juarez the Cartel was running on, in this case, it doesn't need to be. Having good visuals isn't necessarily limited to having realistic looking graphics, but I find games that present a unique visual style have a long-lasting impression. The cel-shaded or comic style look that Gunslinger uses extends from the main menu to the cutscenes to the gameplay. This may not seem like much, but it makes the transitions between the cutscenes and the levels pretty seamless. As a result, it makes Silas's retellings feel more human, more natural, and the lack of visual clash supports that. Everything is continuous, stylish, consistent, and smooth. Having a linear, uninterrupted story with a distinct art style allows game developers to focus more on the themes they're trying to present in their title. With this focus in mind in terms of exploring subjects or themes, you end up with benefits relating to gameplay or even environmental design. In Gunslinger's case, the biggest nod I can give it is it just feels, looks, and sounds like a Western through and through. The dialogue, set pieces, weapons, characters, sounds, objects, and even how assets are laid out in the environments just harken back to what you would expect from a Western.
As my late father pointed out to me more than once, God made men, and Samuel Colt made them equal.
Even with unique takes on real-life characters and places, nothing feels out of place. Even in areas that aren't typically meant to be explored by the player after combat, there's still quite a bit of attention to detail in regards to how objects are placed or how the environment is supposed to make logical sense to the player. For instance, if you take your time looking behind buildings or in alleys, you'll see stuff like, oh, well, this makes sense, there's a water tower people will have to drink. You'll see, hey, next to stables, and piles of logs meant to fuel the furnace for the blacksmith, making the setting more believable. All in all, adding little details like this adds to the overall immersion of the game. And I think that's mainly due to the fact that they kept the game so linear focused instead of trying to expand it into something that it's not.
I'm painting a picture here. There was this beautiful waterfall and a crystal clear stream that led to a verdant valley that was truly...
Consider your picture painted. What happened next?
Well, finally the bastards that were still alive made a last stand.
Now, none of that really matters if the combat isn't engaging, and thankfully Gunslinger's combat is quite solid, at least for the most part. Initially, I was a little disappointed that there wasn't a huge range of weapons, but I think that's for the best. Your arsenal consists of 2 rifle variants, 2 shotgun variants, one of which can be used as a pistol, and 3 different types of revolvers. Each weapon has a distinct punch, a distinct weight to it, and besides their look, you can tell them apart by how much range they have and how much damage they do.
Anybody see Johnny? Come back for this! You hear me?
Hell yeah! That scatter gun was like a double-barreled Howitzer.
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to choose one weapon over the other, or favor one weapon overall. Once you know how each different weapon handles, you're going to find yourself being able to switch between them quite easily, provided you use them appropriately. The right tool for the right job, so to speak. Now, there is one exception to this, and that is the throwable dynamite sticks. They're not bad by any means, and in fact, they do quite a bit of damage and have a large blast radius, but I never felt truly compelled to use them. I was never in a situation where I had to use them. They also feel a little too unbalanced, too overpowered towards the enemies, and quite frankly, they just feel like an afterthought. But other than that, the rest of the arsenal is quite solid. And I think had there been other weapons, they probably would have given me the same impression that the dynamite sticks gave me. The impression being that they're a bit unnecessary, unbalanced, or just plain boring to use. I also want to mention that the enemies aren't exactly challenging. They will take cover, they are going to move around, they won't exactly rush you at times, but overall, they don't exactly present something that I would consider a challenge. Even on the highest True West difficulty, I could easily dispatch a whole group of enemies within seconds, especially when you use the concentration mode, which is just another name for bullet time. Also of note is the occasional duel with some bosses. I found some of these to be actually rather interesting, especially when they're supported by Silas's narration in the background. The controls in these are quite simple, and they're easy to get a hang of. Though thankfully, these duels are used sparingly, and they're changed enough between each duel that it never feels stale. I also want to briefly mention the skill trees. While these skills are nice little bonuses to have, such as higher damage output and better accuracy, they're not essential, and the combat relies more on player input than anything. This sort of restraint helps the combat feel more natural and less frustrating overall. Call of Juarez Gunslinger's use of restraint, focus, and consistency in key areas help it become a memorable shooter. While the combat itself is a little forgiving, I can say that most players are going to be engaged mostly due to the story and the immersive atmosphere. Gunslinger doesn't need to pretend to be anything else or to expand anything it doesn't have to. The game is very engaging on its own merits. And ultimately, I think that's why Gunslinger deserves a lot more attention. And we've reached the end of the video. I really want to thank anyone who stuck by and reached this point. This is my very first YouTube video, and any sort of constructive criticism or suggestion or advice would be greatly appreciated. Feel free to use the comment section down below. I want to provide you with more analyses or potentially some full reviews in the future. And I also wanted to try sharing some of my personal works later on. But on that note, I just want to say my name is Cobalt, and thanks for watching.